Okay, we're going to be talking about validity with measurement specifically. Okay, what if you stepped on the scale and it said you weighed 20 pounds? And the next day it said the same thing. And the day after that, and a total of 5 days in a row, it said you weighed 20 pounds. There's something wrong with the scale. Uh, the scale was reliable. You were getting the same score over and over and over, but it wasn't valid. It was not giving you your actual weight, even though it was reliable. So, validity, the degree to which instruments measure what it intends to measure. So, even though the scale was consistent, it wasn't measuring your weight properly. How well do the conceptual and operational definitions mesh with each other? So, a synonym for validity is accuracy. So, let's look at these targets again. So, only one of these targets were valid. Remember, two of them were reliable, but only one of them is valid. And the one that is valid is target C, because they got the darts in the place where they wanted them to be. Target A, they were reliable, but they weren't valid. They weren't hitting the mark. And then target B, it had poor validity and reliability. Now, something to keep in mind with validity and reliability is that you cannot be valid without being reliable too. If you're valid, it means you are also reliable. You can be reliable without being valid, but you cannot be valid without being reliable. So like here, they were reliable without being valid. But here they were both reliable and valid. And it's impossible to be valid without being reliable. You have to be reliable in order to be valid. Okay, so let's get into different types of validity. So face validity. Do the items on the scale appear to measure what people say the scale is measuring? And it is face validity is often measured by experts. They will look at the measure and decide if it's valid or not. So that's important. Experts look at it and decide that it's valid or not. So if we look at this, let's say an expert was looking at this. They would say, I think this measures depression. And just by looking at it, I'm going to pretend I'm an expert even though I'm not. I would look at this and say, this measures depression. It's a good measure. So that's face validity. So the second kind of validity is content. So content validity is making sure that the measure encompasses everything it's supposed to encompass. So let's give an example. With depression, there are emotional symptoms, physical symptoms, and social symptoms. And depression has to cover all of that. If a good measure of depression will measure all three of those things. If it's missing one of those things, then it doesn't have good content validity. Now, you may get confused about the difference between content validity and face validity. They're really similar. So you can measure content validity by using face validity, having an expert look at it and decide the measure encompasses everything it's supposed to. But there are other ways to measure content validity. You can go and read about it in the literature, the measure you're studying about, and learn what is supposed to be encompassed in that measure by just reading about it. So that's kind of the difference between face validity and content validity. Face validity is only measured by an expert, whereas content validity can be measured by an expert or you looking at the literature. But the important thing is that um, content validity covers everything it's supposed to. So if you don't have the emotional symptoms measured, then you don't have good content validity for depression. You have to have emotional, physical, and social in order for depression to have good content validity. Okay, construct validity. So construct validity is kind of divided into two subtypes of validity, convergent validity and divergent validity. So convergent validity, do multiple measures of the same and or related constructs hang together or operate in consistent ways? So that's kind of a mouthful. Let's get into what I mean by that. So do multiple measures of similar constructs hang together, similar or same constructs? So if we have a new depression scale and an existing depression scale, they should be related. If this depression scale is related to an existing depression scale, then it means it has convergent validity. But if it's not related, or if it's negatively related, then it doesn't have convergent validity. They both measure depression, and so they should be related. They should hang together. So that's convergent validity. Two different scales, they hang together when they're supposed to. So another example of convergent validity could be depression and anxiety. Even though they're not the same exact constructs, they are related to each other. And so if you have a measure of depression and a measure of anxiety, they should be related. If they're not, then there's probably not good convergent validity and something wrong with your measures. So related constructs hang together. So remember, multiple measures of the same and or related constructs hang together. So it doesn't always have to be the same, like in this example, but it has to be related. Okay, so divergent validity. Can the measure differentiate between groups we would expect to score differently? So let's do depression and self-esteem. So when we think about the relationship between depression and self-esteem, we think that they're related, but negatively. As depression goes up, self-esteem goes down. Now that's different from depression and anxiety, that example, because as depression goes up, anxiety will probably go up too. So they're going up together. But with depression and self-esteem, depression goes up and self-esteem goes down. Or self-esteem goes up and depression goes down. So they're going in opposite directions. So here, so if they're related in a negative way, or if they're not related at all, it is divergent validity. We would expect that depression and self-esteem would be negative related. And if they are, then that's great. It would be a problem if they were positively related. Like here we have the new depression scale. If it was positively related to self-esteem, that would be an issue. If self-esteem went up as depression went up, that doesn't make any sense at all, and it would not have divergent validity if that were the case. But if self-esteem goes down as depression goes up, then they're moving away from each other, and that is what they're supposed to do. A second approach to divergent validity is this. Those who are high in self-esteem should score highly on the scale, while those who are low should score low on the scale. So you can have divergent validity within a single scale. You would want people who actually have high self-esteem to score high on self-esteem in your study. If they don't score high in self-esteem in your study, then there's something wrong. And those who have low self-esteem in your study, they should score low in self-esteem. And those two groups should be able to be clearly differentiated, that low self-esteem scoring low and high self-esteem scoring high. So it should be able to distinguish between those two groups. Okay, so fourth kind, criterion. This is also broken into subtypes as well. So, how does the measure relate to an already known standard of performance, the criterion? Okay, so do the scores on the test indicate present performance? So, you're hoping that, for example, at work, if an employee is a good worker um, at the present, then they would score well on a survey given to them at that moment. So that concurrent validity is focused on the here and now, that if you are currently a good worker, you should score well. Um, and then predictive validity. Do the scores on the test predict future performance? So that would be like you took a survey, but then it predicted how well you did in your job later on. An example of that would be with GPA. So high school GPA and college GPA have a correlation coefficient R of 0.3. That's actually pretty low. Correlation coefficients, the closer you are to 0, the weaker they are, and it ranges from -1 to 1. And so why isn't high school GPA predicting college GPA better? So it doesn't have very good predictive validity. Anyway, so yeah, that's predictive validity. Okay, and then here are the types of validity you'll want to know. And that's it.